Shimon Rokach arrived in Jaffa at the tender age of 21, sent from Jerusalem by his father Itzhak, who had won a contract with the authorities of Ottoman Palestine to collect tolls on the road to Jaffa. Itzhak had decided not to live outside Jerusalem, and so sent his son, already active in community matters, to fulfill the obligation in Jaffa. In the cramped quarters and amongst the narrow alleys of the old city, living conditions were unsavory and unsanitary. Furthermore, new arrivals from Europe, although encouraged and helped by Shimon and others for the Zionist cause, made living in already limited space even more difficult. The decision was made to act on the dream of an independent Jewish community settled outside the walls of Jaffa.
נווה צדק, כשהוקמה, הייתה חלוצה. היזמים, שמעון רוקח, שקנה את האדמה מארון שלוש, והיו פה עוד כמה שמות של יזמים. אני חייבת להדגיש, שמות אולי לא ממש מוכרים, מויאל, למזלג. היזמים האלו הקימו שכונה בהון פרטי, ביוזמה פרטית. לפעמים אני חושבת שמה שעשה שמעון רוקח זה כמו קבוצת רכישה. אם כן, עם ערבות הדדית, הגרלה, קופה משותפת. היזמים האלו היו כולם יזמים פרטיים, בהון פרטי, ביוזמה פרטית, ללא תמיכה של שום מוסד.
He died before I was born, so that I didn't know him, but I always heard from my mother who didn't stop talking about him.
What Simon Rokach brought to the mind of the people was the idea that they have to build something separate, something new, something for their own, outside of the alleys, the small alleys of Jaffa. And he was looking together with his brother for the right real estate.
And he gathered around him a group of very enthusiastic people, young people. It was a mixture of Jewish people who were already born in Israel at that time and new immigrants to Israel, mostly from Russia. And together they dreamed about this new location. But at that time, most of the settlements were agricultural settlements. This place was covered with sand. We are talking about sand dunes outside of Jaffa city. Coming to live here was very dangerous, and people had very, very simple life. He had in mind something that was totally new for that era, creating a new Hebrew neighborhood separated from Jaffa itself, which will become later a city. He already envisioned a place full of business, full of industry, people living in a city-like atmosphere.
He succeeded in finding 48 families who were ready to move to the place here. It was quite far away from Jaffa at that time. Today it's nothing, but at that time it took an hour.
And they got the offer from Shlush, which was a real estate agent, and they made the organization that started building in 1886 and 1887.
Shimon Rokach and his brother named the area Neve Tzedek, meaning oasis or spring of justice, possibly as a reference to Jeremiah's prophecy of the return to the land of Judah. Rokach House was one of the first homes built in Neve Tzedek. As the home of Shimon Rokach, it became tantamount to a local community centre, where people gathered every day for advice, to discuss their ideas, or to break bread together.
All the people of the neighborhood at the time used to come and to ask for his advice on anything they did. And he helped everyone wherever he could.
the head of the communities from Jaffa, from Neve Tzedek, and people from the neighborhood. And every night for about 30 years, about something like between 20 to 30 people would come to eat every night.
The first floor was for cooking and food, and at night were the people, the grandfather and grandmother and the boys slept there, the girls were here.
ובאופן טבעי, כשיהודים מקימים שכונה ליהודים בלבד, מיד מקימים מוסדות דת, חינוך, ציבור, עזרה הדדית, ערבות הדדית, בית חולים, ספרייה, כתבי עת ספרותיים.
He also created a hospital at the place so that people can get all the medical help necessary. And actually my father got sick on the ship because he took care of people who were ill. When he arrived to Israel, he was sent immediately to the hospital that my grandfather created.
Shimon Rokach was a very well-known figure in other areas as well. He was the one who established the citrus organization in Israel, which was called the Pardes Syndicate, meaning that he gathered together all the people who had citrus fruits all over Israel, and together they exported the fruit abroad.
One of the first houses built in 1887 belonged to the carpenter Pesach Shulman. This was later to become known as the writer or editor's house due to a succession of auspicious literary tenants like Devorah Baron, Joseph Chaim Brenner, and Joseph Aronovich. In 1998, the house, after years of renovation, was opened as the Gutman Museum when his son donated a collection of several thousand pieces.
נחום גוטמן הגיע בגיל 7 לשכונות העבריות הראשונות עם משפחתו. הוא לא גר במבנה הזה, אבל נחום גוטמן הנציח לנו את נווה צדק ואת תל אביב, את הדמויות שחיו בבית הזה ובשכונה, דמויות של סופרים ומורים שגיבשו פה קהילה ספרותית חזקה מאוד. אפשר לומר שהוא ישב על ברכי כל הסופרים שחיו, וגם בבית הזה, יוסף חיים ברנר, שמאוד אהב אותו, להנציח את המיתולוג, את גיבור התרבות, שהנציח פה גן עדן של ילדות, במקום שאני לא בטוחה שהוא באמת היה גן עדן בכלל. אבל בעיני גוטמן, המראות הראשונים שהוא חווה, חולות זהב, שמיים כחולים, ים כחול, פרדסים ירוקים, את זה הוא הנציח בעדשת עינו, ואת זה, בעצם את זה הוא קבע בעדשת עינו והנציח לימים על בד הציור. הוא גם כתב, הרי הוא גם כתב סיפורים, כך שהוא סרטט ותיעד את אירועי התקופה. זה שהיום המוזיאון הזה, זאת אומרת מוזיאון גוטמן בבית שזכה לכינוי בזמנו בית הסופרים או בית האורחים, זו סגירת מעגל נפלאה.
So only 1911, Tel Aviv was a real new city, and it could not be Neve Tzedek because Neve Tzedek and even the 5,000 people that lived in Neve Shalom and in Machane Yosef and all those suburbs were still part of Jaffa at that time.
Once Tel Aviv started, most of the people from Neve Tzedek moved to Tel Aviv, my family also, and the house was just left.
השכונה הזו במשך שנים הייתה לה תווית של שכונת מצוקה, שכונת עוני, כי לאחר קום המדינה שיקנו כאן שכבות מצוקה, ובמשך שנים, כולל משפחת גוטמן, עברו לתל אביב.
It was next to war zone in 1948. There were snipers from Manshia, which was the northern neighborhood of Jaffa. There were snipers and there were military actions and it was a war zone. And after the War of Independence, the area was in very bad shape. There were old people, poor people, and most of the houses were destroyed and with low maintenance.
עיריית תל אביב לצערי הרב רצתה הרי ב-1965 למחוק את השכונה, להרוס אותה. בתים מאבן כורכר, הרי אתם ראיתם, זה מבוץ, בתים מתפוררים. בתי שימוש בחצרות, סמטאות צרות שנועדו לגמלים וחמורים.
And it was only a group of young students during the late 70s that were fighting the municipality and went to Supreme Court and won against the municipality and the mayor that really wanted to demolish everything. And after that it made it possible to come here and renovate. And really when we renovated the house in 1983, this was very strange to walk here. Nobody thought that there is a future for this place.
זה התחיל למשוך אומנים ואדריכלים שהתחילו לשפץ את הבתים, ולאט לאט זה הפך ליותר ויותר איני כשהנדל"ן מתחיל לפרוח.
We actually developed our first architecture ideas here. And this means that when you work here, everything needs to be very precise because the plots are rather small. Also, when you work in such a neighborhood, you have to be very respectful of all the neighboring buildings, the proportions, the architecture language, and we really, in the beginning, we were really afraid to build something in this area. So we studied very carefully and developed our ideas of how you do new architecture in an old neighborhood and what you take from the past into the future.
Very tiny plots created a necessity to work in the section to try and develop space with height, because you don't have it in the size of your house, but you can give the sense of space by giving nice sections and spaces and light. So this is also something that unique to the architecture of Neve Tzedek.
David Tatakova is one of Israel's most prominent graphic designers and a Neve Tzedek resident since the middle 1970s.
It was cheap. It was the largest space in town I could find. And it was cheap, and I knew that it was going to take 20 years for that to become like Shabazi Street, which is now full with coffee places and fashion stores and bookstores.
David created a mural depicting the beginning and early days of Neve Tzedek, situated in the Susan Dalal Square.
You looked out of the window, everything was dark, because it was between a slum and a room, you know, the whole neighborhood. I mean, now there's no parking anywhere. Now it's crowded, it's getting bourgeois.
The place was given to the municipality so that they will take care of the place. I came to see the place because that was the house of my grandfather. And when I came here, I just met the mayor of Tel Aviv. He was telling the people that he cannot take care of the house because the house is also already in bad condition and it will take too much money to repair it. So when I heard it, I asked him, perhaps you'll give it to me and I'll do it. So he said, please take it. And that's how it happened. It took us a whole year to repair the house because the way we found it was just terrible. We started to tell the story of how Neve Tzedek was at the time before. What I did was really to bring back the story of my grandfather. I was inspired from the point of view that I wanted to do also whatever I can for the public, for other people and so on.
Inaugurated in 1989 by the Dalal family from London in memory of their daughter, the Susan Dalal Center has come to represent Israel in the world of dance. The center is located on the grounds of the first educational establishment built outside the walls of Jaffa. The center has been directed by Yair Vardi since before its inception and is credited as a main influence on the area's regeneration.
It's the place for dance development in Israel. We are serving as ambassador to the world with company who works in Susan Dalal, with company from Susan Dalal, what things that we create, some production. We're sometimes traveling around the world. I think we have a major part in the developing of culture and the leading part of establishing of developing dance in Israel. Also, this place serves one art form, which is something that from beginning we put emphasis on that. We are serving the dance in Israel. Next to it, we're adding a few other things, but the major thing is dance, which is something very unique here and in the world. I mean, it's beyond what we ever imagined that can happen, actually. I mean, the love of the country to the displays, the love of the people of the city to the place, the way the city and dance community and the culture community in Israel embrace this place it's unbelievable. Despite all the bad forecasting of this place that nobody will come in because it's away from the city, it's not in the center, but the center moves where activities are. The right formation of things can develop and can affect the whole area of a city, and I think it's a big success in that sense. For that, we are very grateful for this idea of the Dalal family to commemorate their daughter Suzanne is such a thing that's alive and bring happiness to people contrary to the sorrow they've been suffering. And of course, because of the success of the center, many more moving to Neve Tzedek, which become one of the most important and prestigious places in Tel Aviv to live.
What I want to express is how a woman feels and how a woman acts. I thought that all over the years it were men who worked in art and very few women who did it. And most of the women who did it more or less painted like men. And I want to give expression to what a woman feels. Also, what I try to express is what difficulties of a woman to get work and so on. So these were the main subjects that came out into my art.
We were starting to look for a place to present this exhibition, and it wasn't easy. We didn't want any place, and the pictures are quite big. And then I said, why not here? This is so connected to this place. People that will come over, they will hear the story of the house, they will hear the story of the family, and then the pictures will fit in And that's also the reason while curating this exhibition, we used sculptures that, these cars that were made by Lea many years ago when this house was renovated. And these cars, from that time, we're talking about 30 years ago, they kind of walk around with the cars inside the pictures. So it combines, it goes inside and outside, and it becomes very interesting.
Back then, in 1987, you could see the seeds, you could see groups coming, and today, at any given minute during the day, 24 hours, you can see one group at the beginning of the neighborhood and one group at the end. It's like constant moving.
I do believe that we should preserve this place as it was, and when we renovate, to make it really in the same style, because this is so important to our history. And I do believe that if we shall do that, it will influence the coming generation artistically, architecturally, in any other respect.
Even if people don't know about the history and they don't really search to know about the history, the feeling of walking in the street and looking at the houses, the materials of the houses, different materials that they give different energy to you as a person.
We are looking forward, we are developing dance in Israel. This is the major aim of this center, and that's the path we are taking. We took from beginning and we keep taking it now. We're stretching the quality of dance of Israel from the Suzanne Dalal into the world, and the world is receptive very beautifully for the dance in Israel. So if we are one to contribute via our doing here, so we'll be very successful.
It's a great neighborhood to live in because of its location, close to the beach, which is extremely important, close to city center, you can bike everywhere, and you also have this little village atmosphere.
היום אין ספק שנווה צדק היא השכונה הכי מתוירת בתל אביב. זה מראה גם איזה חשיבות יש לשמר את העבר למען העתיד.
Neve Tzedek was built from the private vision and courage of a few, whose need for autonomy and independence propelled them to organize and to act. What has become in recent years a fashionable neighborhood of Tel Aviv, even a cultural hub, is symbolic of a far more substantial and important legacy.